Good day everyone, I am Lindsay Junio. So for today's video, I am going to discuss about the negotiating diversity in the city. Yes, you got it. We are done on tackling thinking about cities relationally, unsettling cities, cities of connection and disconnection. So let's move on module 2, negotiating diversity in the city. So, negotiating diversity in the city have two subtopics. First is negotiating differences in the city, and the second one is the city life and informal settlers. So here's an overview about our lesson for today, the development of cities, and in particular in the onset of industrial urbanism exerted a major influence on the nature of human association. Ang pag-unlad ng lungsod at industriyang urbanismo ay malaking impluensya sa mga tao. Ayon kay Tonis, pinahina ng urbanisasyon ang tradisyonal nating pamumuhay or traditional rural way of life based sa ating pamilya at pamayanan. Bagamat pinalitan ito ng impersonal, kontraktual at pansariling interes lamang na natatangi para sa bayan at lungsod. Individuality, not community, is the hallmark of urban life. This perspective was reinforced by Durkheim 1893, Spengler 1918, and in particular Wirth 1938, who believed na ang mga tagalungsod, anuman ang panglipunang ranggo o katayuang etniko, ay hindi maiiwasang tumugon sa kanilang pisikal at panlipunang kapaligiran sa isang depersonalized urban manner. This argument questions the possibility of community life in the modern city. Another alternative perspective is provided by those who support the idea of the socially cohesive community in cities. Envisage the city as an inherently human place where sociability and friendliness are natural consequences of social organization at the neighborhood level. So, her views are supported by studies of working class communities and urban villages in cities on both sides of the Atlantic by Jacobs 1961. Yes, iniisip ang lungsod bilang isang likas ng lugar ng tao kung saan ang pakikisalamuha at pagiging palakibigan ay natural na bunga ng panlipun ng organisasyon sa antas ng kapitbahayan. Ang kanyang pananaw ay sinusuportahan ng mga mag-aaral ng komunidad ng uring manggagawa at mga nayon sa kalunsuran sa mga lungsod sa magkabilang panig ng Atlantiko. In this chapter, we examine the main methods of identifying residential areas within the city, employing the statistical techniques of social analysis and factorial ecology, and the notion of sense of place. We explore the concepts of identity and community and the role of urban communities in advanced capitalist society, and examine the nature, basis, and social spatial outcomes of residential congregation and segregation in terms of the key dimensions of social status, lifestyle, and community. Next is the learning outcomes. So, at the end of this lesson, students should be able to describe the effects of having diversity in cities, explain the development of city life, and last one, identify the different events and incidents that altered cities. To formally start our discussion, allow me to play a short video regarding to our lesson that will be discussed by John Levy. Thank you.
Different people negotiate different ways. An older gentleman might negotiate one way, while a single mother of three might negotiate another way. These differences are not only present here in the US, but also when we negotiate with individuals from other countries. Culture influences how individuals negotiate and how they view and interpret the negotiation process. If we understand that negotiations are conversations aimed at reaching an agreement, and if we can also understand that different cultures reach agreements in different ways, then we have the basis of international negotiations. That is to say, how one culture may look at the negotiation process totally different than another. These differences can create conflict in the process. There are several main areas where cultural differences impact negotiating. The following are all differences that may arise during the negotiation process due to cultural differences. Desire for a long-term relationship or just a one-time deal. Preference to win negotiating or preference for a win-win negotiating. Informal or formal attitude, direct or indirect communication style, show emotion or hide emotions, decisions made by the group or by the leader. Let's look at each of these points to get a better idea of how they can affect negotiation. First, we can discuss whether the negotiating party is looking for just a one-shot type of business or long-term relationship. While some markets might be looking for just a contract, Spain for example, members of other countries might be looking for a long-term relationship, India for example. Next, we have the win-win thought process of negotiations. Some cultures look at negotiating as a win-win type of process, as the Japanese do, but countries like Spain typically do not view the negotiation that way. They prefer to win the negotiation and are not as concerned with the win-win proposition. Personal style also plays a cultural part in negotiations. Specifically, is a person more formal, professional, detailed, structured, and businesslike, or informal, more personable, wanting to connect with the other party when it comes to negotiating? As it relates to negotiating, the Germans are more formal where individuals from Mexico are more informal. This formality helps guide how these two different cultures negotiate and in turn how you should negotiate with them. Tied somewhat to the aspects of formal or informal culture is the aspect of whether individuals in the culture communicate directly or indirectly. An example of this is in negotiations, yes does not mean yes with the Japanese. Yes means I understand, and is very indirect means of communicating. On the other hand, the Israelis believe in very direct communication, which can sometimes feel off-putting to those who do not understand this cultural difference. There are many other aspects that can affect negotiations, such as if individuals in the culture typically hide how they're feeling, like the Japanese, or do they show their feelings right away, like much of the Latin culture. There is always the concept of how group decision making is handled. Do they make a decision as a group, or does one person in the group make the decision? Many Asian cultures stress team consensus before a decision can be made, and typically in the US, we're looking for the group leader to make the decision. All the aspects that were just explained influence how negotiations are going to take place. Each country, unless they are well educated in the negotiation position of other countries, will enter a negotiation from the perspective of what they are most comfortable with, mainly how they negotiate in their home country. Do we not, as Americans, enter into negotiations thinking how everyone in the negotiation should act? As we have seen here, that is not the case, and different cultures will negotiate in different ways, or we could say from different perspectives. And unless a person understands these cultural nuances, they can perceive these nuances as being rude, time-wasting, or even disrespectful. Negotiating is an art no matter what country you're in. Weaving your way through a negotiation so you can obtain what you want or need is a skill unto itself. Thus, it makes sense that understanding cultural aspects of negotiating can make you a stronger negotiator. As the world gets smaller and the organizations become more diverse, it is not just the international traveler that has to be aware of these cultural issues. Indeed, for anyone to be truly skilled negotiator, they have to know the person they are negotiating with, which includes the cultural aspect. Remember, when dealing with culture and negotiations and potential conflict, there are several main areas that are present. Desire for a long-term relationship or just a one-time deal, preference to win negotiating or preference for a win-win situation, informal or formal attitude, direct or indirect communication style, show emotion or hide emotions, and finally, decisions made by the group or by a leader.